Hello. Cheers. It's 15 minutes before last week. So Facebook has been challenging, but this time it was a little bit quicker. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining in this week to our new episode. We are a little behind, so I'm just going to get right into it right out the bat. So, as you all know, those of you who have been following into us on a weekly basis,
somewhere to be,
or a monthly basis.
Yeah, why are you being so fast here?
Oh, okay, good point, good point.
It's an hour.
I got nowhere else to go.
Is anyone watching?
Is everybody?
You want to enjoy what the content you're seeing, right?
Good, good. And if you are watching, be sure to comment in. Let us know you're watching, right? So, as everybody knows, right, we all get to pick a different album every week, and so, or a different month, thank you. And so I had last month with Bill Withers, and so this month we are on track for Brad to help out with. So what's going on, Brad? Tell us your thought process.
Okay. It's always a hard pick for me because I have a lot of albums that I like, of course, but it's obvious, but they're kind of all over. I like these records. So anyway,
we're on camera, right?
No, I'm just like looking at myself. I'm sorry. Okay.
So it was my turn again. So I chose Zombies, Odessey and Oracle, which was released in 1968. And
what are you doing over there?
Nothing.
You're making faces.
distracting.
Poor Brad.
Yeah. This is what I would consider one of my top 10 desert island albums. If I had to choose 10 albums to go on a desert island with, this would probably be one of them. And I'm guessing that my peeps here probably wouldn't agree with me, but it is one of my favorites personally. And I guess the reason I chose it is because of the hit single Time of the Season, which for some reason, when I was about 10 years old when it was released and became a hit, it just grabbed me. And I always thought it was such a cool single. So that got me interested in the Zombies and started seeking out their music and that sort of thing. This record is the second of the Zombies albums. The first one contains songs like She's Not There and Tell Her No, which were top hits in the United States. And this also contains their third number one single, which is Time of the Season. The Zombies were dropped by Decca Records after a few years. They released a slew of singles, an EP, and the first album. And then they were on their own. And they had to finance part of this project. And CBS picked them up, Columbia Records in the UK. And they made this album. And I think a lot of people, a lot of bands in this time frame were trying to do like a psychedelic kind of record or shift gears and stay in the vibe that the Beatles had created, like with Sgt. Pepper and all the psychedelia that was going on. And this is kind of along those same lines. However, it falls more into the Pet Sounds category of Baroque pop, and I guess it would follow in that vein more than anything with vocal harmonies and things like that. So it's one of those records that I used to play, and then once in a while I wasn't sure what the big deal was, and then all of a sudden everything clicked to me. You'll hear others say the same thing here about a favorite album of theirs, where it just all of a sudden made sense. Mm-hmm. And so I enjoy listening to this record a lot. It has quite a story. They didn't quite finish the album and had at Abbey Road Studios, and 2 or 3 other cuts had to be completed in another place. And I think it was at Olympic Studios, if I'm not mistaken, in the UK. And Time of the Season was the very last track. Well, by that time, the band was going through a very personality problems and infighting and that sort of thing going on. And they finished the song. It's probably one of their greatest songs, and the band broke up. And part of the story about this is that the album was released, and then in America, Time of the Season became a huge hit. By that time, the band had already broken up. Rod Argent left, keyboard player, and started Argent. Hold Your Head Up High, that whole thing. Pardon me.
I learned something today.
So they were on, and then he went on to some other successes with that band. But by that time, they had already broken up, and this was such a big song. So this is actually the second cover in the United States. You'll see the British cover there on your screen, the front cover on the left side, and the reverse on the right. In the States, they made a record cover similar to this, but then once Time of the Season came along and was a hit, they repressed it with this cover. So that's what you see here. You'll also notice that they spelled Odessey wrong, and that was kind of, I don't know if it was done on purpose or something. I think it was an error, actually, but then they just kind of lived with it and made it part of the lore of the record. Yeah, so this is a really great record, and it was done in mono in the UK. There is a mono mix that is dedicated mono, and they took it to CBS, and CBS said, hey, it's great, guys, but we need a stereo mix. Mono was kind of coming to its end, dedicated mono in 1968, and so the Zombies themselves funded the stereo mix. So they paid for it themselves, came up with a stereo mix, and then the album finally came out. And is considered now a pop psych kind of masterpiece. I even like it better than Pet Sounds. Nothing against Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds is great. But they started this vocal thing, and other groups picked up on it. The Zombies are one of them. So
It's kind of interesting that, this, first of all, being born in '69 or released in '69, to me, just looking back on that period, just growing up, because I got my first transistor radio when I was like 4. I've always been into music. That song is like iconic of that entire period, and yet it's kind of funny because it almost didn't see the light of day. If it hadn't all of a sudden had a resurgence in popularity and they got together and reissued that album, we would have missed out on that. And then they broke up right after anyway. Yeah. And so, and then at that point, the psychedelic thing was kind of over. I mean, we were into the 70s, and away we go. But to have, I remarked on that when we were listening to the album here. We get to that track, and I thought that earlier today when I was previewing the album at home. It's like we get to that song and go, well, was this the rest of the album? I guess maybe I'm too young to have a feel for what psychedelic really was, but I wasn't getting a psychedelic feel off the rest of the album.
okay.
But I could just be wrong. I don't know.
I think it's there, but not as heavily as it is on Time of the Season. And Time of the Season, you're absolutely right. It's kind of an epitaph for the end of the 60s, kind of closing off in 1969. Very, very accurate.
Mellotron done hurt, and the way that the vocals were recorded.
Yeah.
Well, what would classify one of our psychedelic connoisseurs? What would properly be labeled a psychedelic sound?
I mean, you have Jefferson Starship. You have that whole bunch of that San Francisco type sound. The Moody Blues. You have Hendrix was a different vein, but still psychedelic. I mean, pretty much Santana was considered psychedelic. But we were talking during the record that these categories that these labels that people put things in, just to try to, for whatever reason, just kind of get all muddy, right? Yeah. So, this is it sounds very much like a psych record to me. It does not sound like a Jimi Hendrix psych record, though. So they're two completely different veins if you go down that road. I would wager to bet, without having never heard the rest of that album, I think The Hit is the worst song on it. I actually think it sounds to me.
Because it was too normal.
No, I don't think it's too normal. I think it was recorded and it was released and it hit that vein. So the other thing we talked about is how sometimes music can get released and it hits popular culture at the right time in the right space, and then they just kind of get this life of their own. I actually feel it, and it doesn't fit with the rest of the record. So it almost feels like it was added as an afterthought, as a release, as a single to try to get the record out there. Now that's probably not how it worked, but because it doesn't fit, I mean, Mike and I have his lessons from the 80s and 90s where they literally would create a song just to release it as a single. So maybe that kind of influence runs into there, but I actually enjoyed pretty much every other song on that record more, surprisingly. And you can get into they even fall into that when progressive rock was coming out, another label. You have a lot of things. There's a lot of progressive sound in that matches up with some of that other that was coming up at the same time. So
I think
I was gonna say that as we were talking beforehand, Brad said that he would label it Baroque pop. I was personally thinking it was more power pop, more than even psychedelic. That was my first thought and I really liked a lot of just how the randomness of a lot of the lyrics, right? That sometimes you're just like, what is this? Like you're trying to kind of go along. It's not like any kind of country type where, right, you get story songs and, right, you see the stories coming on and some of these lyrics are just out of left field. I was thinking about, I made some of the songs that I liked on here. I Want Her, She Wants Me. The One Friends of Mine, all of a sudden we just have random couples' names just repeatedly thrown out there. Bill and Sue, John and Mary, and it's like, okay, so
That's what it is. That's what they were doing.
right?
Well, you wonder, lyric-wise, they probably were just, you don't know the headspace they were in.
Mm-hmm.
It's what becomes psychedelic. Were they going out to make a psychedelic album, or was it just an influence of the substances they were under, and
or just the time,
or the time, and it became psychedelic? Because you can't tell me that none of those guys weren't using mind-altering drugs, and so.
But musically, I guess where I get hung up on what I think is psychedelic is the stuff that you hear is really more experimental. That's why the mellotron in the last song is finally like, okay, well, this is what I'm thinking, but I have to admit, I really didn't hone in and listen on the lyrics, and I guess that's probably where that comes from. But the rest of the record is just so solid. It's just representative of something far different than Time of the Season.
that's a good point on the instrument and the instrumentation, but look at it from a different perspective. So Psych was there, and I've always looked at that, the mellotron and all those types of things. That always felt more progressive to me than Psych.
Ooh.
So you're taking these instruments that don't necessarily belong in rock music, popular music, and now all of a sudden we're throwing them in there. And that's kind of how that progressive label always kind of advanced for me.
And I even think of progressive, I think too of more, even like we were saying, experimental guitars, and there's not much guitars in that at all. It's done more with the.
But when
Keyboards,
people talk about progressive, right, we all automatically fall back into Rush. Rush is the progressive band that everybody thinks of, but Rush got their start somewhere, and it was not. They just didn't pop out of the. They just didn't fall out of the snow in Canada and created this genre of music, right? They were influenced by people well before them.
Do you think that when they set out with this album that they were kind of trying to navigate between the guardrails of Sgt. Pepper over here and Pet Sounds over here, and trying not to be derivative as they're going through this, and then at the when they get to the last song, they're like, "I hell with it."
But you hear it in the songs. You hear it. You hear Pet Sounds in there. You hear all these things. There's even a part, and I don't remember which track it is, but it instantly reminded me of Scarborough Fair by Simon and Garfunkel. So there's just these either callbacks or flash forwards to something else that's going on, which really intrigued me in the record. I really enjoyed it.
But those things are just out there. It's not even so much as being derivative or even an influence or anything like that. That's just kind of, I think, that was the ecosystem that music was being created in at that time, and that's been through the history of
Well,
popular music, is that things kind of all sound somewhat the same, but I don't know. That's not
well,
derivative.
that happens.
Yeah.
And then sometimes that stuff is industry led. You know, the labels will get into it and they'll find either make bands do what's popular. Or
Well, what I was
they'll
thinking of,
seek out bands that they can.
Yep.
well, I was
throw
thinking
out
of
there.
something I really enjoyed, like what you were saying. And Lance had made a comment about the pet sounds, kind of sound in the harmonies that it reminded you of, and you made a comment. What was that again?
Oh, just an old article I saw about someone commenting that the Zombies actually had better harmonies and melodies than even the Beatles, which I don't know. Listening to that, yeah, it's just their vocals with the instrumentation just sounded perfect. Like you said, there wasn't a lot of guitar, but like the bass just grooves throughout. You have the
That's good.
keyboard, the like I don't know. It just was all a really good.
If they'd
meld,
had the
whatever
fortune
it is.
to be the first ones to show up over here with long hair and boots, who knows what could have happened.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it was easy for me to, as a lyric guy, you know, I could really focus on the lyrics because there wasn't a lot that was really pulling me away, like with the loud guitars, or you know, with some of the freestyle drumming and other things that are going
That
on.
was anti-guitar.
Yeah, no, exactly.
He's in trouble.
He's got to pick something every month. Changing the story.
But that's a good point, Kenny, that it's easier to hear those harmonies when there isn't a lot to distract you. The bass line is under, it's very subtle. It's you can hear it, it's predominant, but it doesn't take away from, you hear that. It's sometimes the Beatles that does get lost in the musicality of the production, the performance.
So what drew you to this originally, Brad? What,
Well, it was that single.
just the one single.
Time of the Season. But I also liked the earlier hits like Tell Her No and She's Not There. I thought those are great pop records. And it was like, that was 1964, 65 something. And then there was a kind of a quiet lull there. And all of a sudden they come back with this. But that song, for some reason, when I was growing up and I was hearing that on the radio, somehow just captured my imagination. I don't know.
It's got a vibe. It's a song. The way it's arranged, it's kind of like Animals' "House of the Rising Sun." Even to this day, that song's just got a vibe that probably could never be replicated again. And it just
It's a good documentary song, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. What I'm saying is, if you were to put to film something representative of this period in time, this song is a no-brainer. In fact, I think that's a compliment.
They also had some classical training, and probably in the keyboard area. So that lends itself to, when you listen to the record, you'll hear certain things, chord changes or that sort of thing that are kind of along classical lines. So there's a little bit of that mixed in. Collectability about the record, well, it was not selling real well. The singles didn't sell well. And now is considered sought after quite heavily by collectors. Original copies of the British mono and stereo copies I've gotten really pricey. The U.S. copies can go for much less. A little harder to find that first cover. The other thing I can mention though is that there are excellent reissues of this record that have been put out. Even the mono has been repressed. There's a picture disc. There's a lot of ways you can hear the music. I also would recommend highly, if you don't have any Zombies albums and all of a sudden you're going, I've missed the boat and I want to get into the Zombies, I would go to Time of the Zombies. It's a collection that was released in 1973 and contains one album of the early works of the Zombies, and the second album is actually Odessey and Oracle. So you're getting pretty much everything in that one package. There's a lot of singles and B-sides missing, of course, but it's a great way. Great introduction is the Time of the Zombies, a double album on CBS, and it's a great way to get into it.
Here's the track listing. If the people are watching on a big enough screen to be able to see that.
And that would be the CBS labels there, yeah, the English.
That's a British stereo copy there.
And that was, you
Very
said 1,500 up to 1,500?
Well,
2,000?
one of our group members here saw it recently on eBay. A super clean copy in mono go for about $1,500. So some of the collector, it's gotten a lot of collectability, and it's considered a kind of a classic from that time.
And that cover looks like to die for a cover to put on the wall, huh?
Yeah, the British copies were laminated too.
Ooh.
Covers were laminated, so they're really nice piece.
And we've talked about that numerous times, I think, in the store. A lot of the guys, when we're talking about records, we wish American covers would have that laminate cover. It would be so easy to fix people that write their names and do other things to their covers, right?
Yeah.
It's actually one of the jokes I really like of Mike, when Mike will see someone's name, let's say, and I'm sorry if Betsy Smith is watching, and we look at an album and it says Betsy Smith on it, and Mike will say, "What, Mike, did you do it in your style?" Let's call it.
Let's look it up, see if they're on Facebook, and
Let 'em know
Get
we
her
got
album
their
back.
record.
We got your album, Betsy.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah, Betsy.
Well, they'd take records to parties and they put their names on it, so everybody got their record back.
Yeah.
Funny story, I was actually sorting records here at Music and More. I found a few singles with somebody's name on them, and I said, I know this person.
Yeah.
They go to my church. So I'll tell them I found their records if they're missing them. So
Hey,
Anyway,
what a way
they-
to
I
replace
got a
them.
lot of them that say Solomon on it. So someday I'm going to find Solomon.
Hey, thank God it isn't Saruman, right? We'd think he's from the Lord of the Rings.
Right?
Thank you,
I don't know
Saruman.
what you're talking about.
Okay. Hey, there was another really, really great comment. You want to see the genius of Brad? I'm going to throw something out there. I want you all to listen to this. This is.
Oh, boy.
I love when Brad gets in these little conversations. So we're sitting here talking, and Brad literally can really pick out the sounds. He's got a really good ear for picking out these sounds. And he says,
The rest of
"This
his
is
fault."
fake stereo. This is fake stereo. Tell us now.
Okay.
What is this argument, Brad?"
Well, the rest of me is falling apart, but I still have my hearing, I guess. So, no,
Was a little louder.
I knew there was a track on the album though that was done, which was reprocessed stereo. So, in order to explain this, I try not to go on and on about it because it can be mind blowing. In the '60s, they took mono recordings and used like frequency crossover to put the bass into one channel and the high end up on the other channel, and put them out as stereo records. They had a stereo effect so that people that were buying 2-channel audio equipment for some reason would not be offended that it was all just single track audio. And a lot of times the single track monos in the 60s are much better mixes than the stereo ones. But one track on this is a reprocessed stereo because they added some instrumentation, and when they did that, they lost the stereo track. So they had to reprocess it to kind of, so it kind of fit the album, I guess.
And
The one other thing I can say about that is that track now has resurfaced on some other compilation that's come out now, so you can hear it in stereo. But the one track on the B side is actually a mono track that is reprocessed.
I do that with if I'm recording a mono instrument, and granted, I'm not a musician, I'm a video guy, but I have had to do some audio and music recordings, and what I'll end up doing is, instead of just putting the bass over here and the high end over here, what I'll do with that instrument is I will literally take a 10 or 20 band EQ and literally do the sawtooth thing for the left channel and the reverse sawtooth on the right. And that's how you can get some of these. Well, you have an electric guitar, which is a mono instrument, and you'll be listening to it, and it kind of sounds like it's back and forth. And depending on what's being played and how many bands they do this to will determine whether or not it sound, which part of that sounds like it's coming from your left or right channel. And, you know, in order to do it more subtly, maybe you don't go, you know, all the way to 0 on notching those. So you have kind of a common ground as a mono, but then you have certain frequencies that'll appear left or right, and that gives it that depth.
Yeah, and
It's a
the
cheap trick.
stereo spacing and mixing kind of came around well in the late 60s, early 60s. It was almost a novel idea where they'd pan the drums and the guitar over to one channel and the voices over to the other side. If you have like the first 4 Beatle albums, they're done that way, and a lot of other recordings are done that way. That was just what they did. They just didn't figure out the panning and the imaging that stereo could make. And that's why a lot of purists believe that the first 4 Beatle albums are best in mono, because they sound just more natural and better and mixed right and not so odd and quirky.
And so to continue that thought, what I'd also like to say here too now, so as an album retailer, I find these vinyl albums and I sell them. And so oftentimes when it comes to finding these records, what I like to try to do is to find them in the various copies, and some copies knowing which one is worth more, so obviously I can make more money on it. And so when you find old Beatles albums, right, trying to get a mono copy or trying to get certain versions of stereo. And so when we hear what Brad just explained to you, so I love to always try to explain, that's a teacher in me probably, trying to kind of teach people what they're looking at when they grab their album. So for example here, if I take this album behind here and I say Ella, and we see up in the corner here, right, it says stereo. And so what ends up happening now is I know, right, we're going to get that 2-channel, right, bouncing and hearing sound. So the best way too, if you have it with the young kids, right, if you're putting on your headphones, right, and you can hear those sounds really simply kind of going back and forth, rather than just having one continuous, right, dedicated sound. And so where you're going to get with a mono. And then just to give you one more level, in the late 60s and early 70s, they tried to take it to a new level where they went with a quad sound, where they went 4 channels. And so to get that, though, you had to have special receivers. And if you ever see quadraphonic stereos and receivers, if I'm out at a garage sale and I see one, I know I can make some good money on those. They're hard to find, and it would be really nice to have them. I would love to have one in the store, just when we talk about some of these quad records. And actually, in the store, we literally had somebody came up and asked about the Aerosmith. They were like, why is this one like twice the price as the other toys in the attic? And so we got into talking about the whole quadraphonic.
Yeah, the 73 to 75 quadraphonic records, there were basically 2 systems, the SQ system from Columbia and the discrete from RCA. And we're kind of in a rabbit hole right now, Kenny. But anyway, these were like the precursor to surround sound.
Yes.
You'd get your 5.1 surround, 5 channels for home theater and stuff like that. That's what they were really attempting to do, is surround you with music. And these records came out, certain titles came out mixed in quad, for quadraphonic, and you had to have a 4-channel amplifier, of course. And you had to have a certain stylus and decoder to, break down the groove of 2 into 4. And there was information in there, 4 channels. In order for them to do that, they cut a lot of the quadraphonic records at half speed. I think they're all at half speed. But they also had to remove some bass to make room for, or lower frequencies, to make room for the other information. And that's why some of them are very collectible. Some are just collectible because if you like a certain group, you're just going to go and get it, whatever, just to have it.
Yeah.
But it's some people claim they have slightly different mixes, and that's probably just because of the way they were encoding the music. But it failed, and the companies just couldn't. It just didn't get any traction. There was also quadraphonic 8-track, which was discrete because you didn't have the decoding. They actually had 4 channels of information. Reel-to-reel also was a format that had 4-channel, actual 4-channel discrete recording playback.
Equipment. We talked about this. Maybe it was just Kenny when that guy come in, but people don't want to change their equipment. That's all
Yeah.
new equipment you gotta buy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was expensive at the time. I mean, and people weren't. I mean, that's probably one of the main factors that it didn't take off is who wants to buy all new equipment. When
That's
they're-
why people are still buying DVD instead of Blu-ray.
Or I was just going to
That's a good
mention.
point.
I was going to mention
Now they
3D didn't take off for the same reason, right?
Right.
You got to buy a
Yep.
new 3D player. You got to buy the 3D.
See,
People all had the 3D TVs,
Yep.
but they didn't want to put all the other pieces with it.
But you make the argument the industry could have pushed it more and phased everything else out, but they probably realized at some point that it was
not
pro-
cost effective.
not cost effective. It wasn't like going from records to cassettes to CDs.
Right.
They could see that's where it was going to go.
The leap has to be worth the juice worth the squeeze when you think
Yep.
about it. What CDs? Okay, CDs were better quality. They didn't have tape hiss. They didn't get eaten in the player. But the other thing was the random access.
Mm-hmm.
You
Same
can
with
play it in your car.
same with DVD versus
Take it
VHS.
with
There
you.
was a noticeable quality difference, but also there was random access. And after that, you need that next big leap. I don't know if enough people wanted to do quadraphonic. It's just like right now, enough people don't really want to do 4K or 8K in video.
Right.
So,
It was more of a case too of also VHS versus beta, because you had two different distinct types of quadraphonic, and they weren't interchangeable as far as I remember. You couldn't play a Columbia record on the RCA discrete system and vice versa. It just they weren't compatible.
Yeah.
But if you find a quad record, you can play it on your stereo, and no harm
So they
done.
get 2 channels.
That's right.
They sound. I've got a few quads,
sound
and
different.
they don't sound. Well, I've done comparisons on the store here on like that Toys in the Attic, and I think you got a bunch of quads, but there's Eagles on the Border.
Yeah.
But like the quadraphonic Toys in the Attic, there's just like a weird echoing effect in the vocals, and
Yes, and that brings me back to the Beatles thing too. I'll even go deeper on that. The first 4 albums, British mono, not US, because in the States they added reverb and some other trickery to make them palatable for American audiences, and I think it's crazy. If you really want to hear the Beatles, buy mono copies of the British, and they've been reissued too. They're just harder to find.
what's your favorite Beatles album, Ken?
Can anyone have a favorite Beatles
Yes.
album?
Most definitely.
This is kind of an inside joke
It's an
here.
inside joke here. They know how much I love the Beatles, and so anyway,
very first boy band.
right? I want to also just kind of say about that too. So, like when you're looking at records, when it comes to quality, so taking off of Brad's comment there, one of our probably recommendations would be to look for mono or stereo, but probably try to avoid some of the fake stuff. And what that would be is the stereo or mono electronically processed kind of copies.
Yeah, they're usually clearly marked and quite annoying, I think, and to listen to. But that's just me, and some people can hit the mono button. You have a record like that, hit the mono button, or you can make your system mono. Some stereo systems will do that, and that'll avoid some of the headache that you get from listening to reprocessed stereo.
And one of the things I've been trying to do is to list the album by 3-4 o'clock so that you could try to listen to it before you come in and check in. And if any of you did do that, please kind of chime in, let us know what you thought of that, to try to help you understand our conversation. And so you can either agree or disagree, or then give some feedback as well as to what you thought about the album that what we're talking about, and sharing that comments. And I do have a comment from Eric on here I wanted to say, is going back to our psychedelic comment. Eric said, psychedelic to me is ambient with a droning guitar style, somewhat subjective of course, but you feel like you know it when you hear it. Psychedelic music is a great headphone music. It's great headphone music.
Yeah, because I think a lot of kids were probably smoking weed in their bedrooms in the late 60s and put them in their headphones so mom and dad couldn't hear it, and getting into the zone.
Those big old cans.
Right? Have them downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a good example of that though is Pink Floyd, right? So you take the first Pink Floyd album, it was very psychedelic, and even there was even a case to be made that when I was growing up, people referred to like The Wall as psychedelic. So we were a generation removed from actual psych music. So actually, yeah, generation or two. So Eric's point is actually really good, and that's kind of what brought me back to that, because that's instantly what I think of as Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall.
Well,
Psychedelic, and really wouldn't.
I don't think
By today's standards, wouldn't necessarily.
But I don't think they were going. I don't think Pink Floyd was going for a psychedelic thing.
Right.
On Dark Side,
No.
it could be. You know, I
No,
can see where
absolutely.
you would think, and part of that comes with just perception.
Yep.
I think in the kind of the drug culture.
Yep. For sure.
You know, and that's I'd have got into a thing on Facebook one time about Dark Side of the Moon, and you know,
You were
'cause-
arguing with
you know, because why not? And it's about someone made a comment about not smoking enough weed to like get into Dark Side of the Moon, and I said, well, if you need to use mind enhancing drugs to get into it, then you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons.
well, but you know, I suppose you could say even like going to something like the shaman, in a '90s techno fashion, for crying out loud. They even had monologues by Timothy Leary in there. I mean, if you want to say that. So, I don't know.
But it's something like, okay, I'm looking at the album cover on this, and whether it's a psych album or not, you look at that cover and you're like, you're gonna think that's a psychedelic.
I think a lot of
based
people
on the cover.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in that 67, 68 tried to go that way. I to keep up with they wanted to sell records. They wanted the kids to listen to it, and I even have like a Del Shannon record that I was turned on to like about 3 or 4 years ago that has a real psych feel to it. It's like, why are you doing this? But it worked, and I like it. I really liked it. There's a Chad and Jeremy album. You know, they're like folk guys, and they did this album called Of Cabbages and Kings.
Psych folk.
Yeah, and it's just kind of psychedelic, and the guy has a Nero coat on, and he's, you know, all of a sudden they're psychedelic. You know, they tried to put that on, and some of it worked, and some of it didn't.
Mr. Bungle, same thing. Maybe I'm the only Mr. Bungle.
I was going,
I'll just,
Mr. Bunghole? You know.
yeah, as you were.
Totally.
Hey, let's change gears a little bit here. Here in the store, we all have items that we pick for the month, and so let's go through some of those albums, and we have some votes. We'll draw a winner.
You want to go alphabetically on these?
Okay, give us alphabetical.
Well, we got to go with Air Supply's greatest hits.
Oh, let me start. My album that I picked was Air Supply, and just for Mike, you know, it's a beautiful compilation album. You know, it's got great hits through and through on here, from Lost in Love, Even the Nights Are Better, I'm All Out of Love, right? And Every Woman in the World. There's so many good songs in here. And for me,
it's the greatest hits. It's the greatest hits album. It is a good album.
So for me, what draws me to a group like Air
Why
Supply,
don't they just call themselves Oxygen?
right? Air Supply for me is it kind of touches on some of my emotional side. I really like emo music. It's right slow. It's sappy. It kind of draws out feelings out of me. And so with that, I've always loved Air Supply and listening to them. I would probably say if I had to pick 10 songs that were my greatest songs of all time, All Out of Love has been always one of my favorite songs of all time. So,
Well, I will admit that I bought that in San Antonio last August.
Okay.
So, obviously on CD. But
Okay.
me and me. But yeah, no, I feel you.
do you feel it? Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yes, that counts.
There's our Elvis thing. Well, alphabetically, our next album.
38:23.
38 minutes. I didn't even think
Wow.
about it till that time.
You got a timer?
Yes, we time him every week or every month.
Alphabetically, our next album is CCR.
Oh, that's me. I picked CCR. This is their first album. It has a few hits on it. I Put a Spell on You and Suzy Q, both of which are actually covers. They're not originally CCR songs. Probably not my favorite CCR album, but I don't know. You just can't go wrong with Creedence Clearwater Revival. So that was my pick.
That's one of those where John Cafferty was like not allowed to record by his label because he sounded too much like CCR back in the 80s.
Well, CCR is one of those bands that's kind of like time of the season, and their songs are just like a stamp of that period in time.
Yep.
And John Fogerty's probably the only guy that's ever gotten sued for plagiarizing
sounding
himself.
For sounding too much like him. Yep. If I'm doing my math correctly, our next album is Fastway.
That's mine. So I picked Fastway. It's an early 80s rock band. Started by Fast Eddie Clarke and Pete Way. Fast Eddie Clarke was a guitar player for Motorhead. Pete Way was a bass player for UFO. And they got an unknown singer, Dave King at the time, who was unknown. Anyway, Pete Way couldn't, contractual obligations with his label for UFO, couldn't continue on with the band, so he didn't actually record the album or anything, or do anything with them, but the name stuck because it's a cool name. But it came out in the early 80s, and they were kind of, I don't think it took off too well because those guys were they were senior guys at the time already, Fast Eddie and stuff. You know, they'd been around a while, and it's kind of considered a hair metal band or a hair album. But I can't agree with any band that has roots to Motorhead and UFO would be considered hair metal.
Right.
But
Well, I mean, if you listen to early Ministry, you know, Ministry being an industrial group, you listen to their early stuff and it was like 80s alternative techno pop. So I don't
and
know.
then the singer Dave King, who was kind of unknown at the time, but now he's a singer. The band Flogging Molly, that kind of, I don't know what they are, Irish rock or whatever. He's a singer in that band, so he's had more success in a completely different genre and band at many years later. But
Got some of those CDs downstairs.
this is a cool album, and it's been factory, if you could see, factory sealed for your protection.
I feel safe.
So
I
love
think
the
I
things
can
that
call
seal for
that back. Oh,
protection.
this one doesn't have that because the one that we have on the graphic doesn't have the
Sticker.
laminate on there. But so what were the songs that we would know off of
the
that
hit one on that one was Say What You Will. That was a pretty popular one. Easy Living is another good one. They actually did, like, one of their last albums was a soundtrack album for the movie Trick or Treat.
one? Oh,
That featured Ozzy and Gene Simmons. Kind of one of those cheesy late 80s horror movies, and they tied the soundtrack in, and it's cool.
well, for the next one, should I go Brad by Igor or Stravinsky? I guess that determines whether or not you go
Yeah.
Let
next.
Brad go next.
All right, here we go. Igor Stravinsky.
Yeah, we need to recover from this. So I picked. There's always one in the crowd, right? Igor Stravinsky, 20th century classical music. I do listen to a lot of forms of music, and thank you for having that. There's like a bazillion versions of this, but video guy Clint found the exact copy on the Nonesuch label. It is The Rite of Spring. This is one of my favorite classical records. Actually, the conductor that I like most is Pierre Montreux, I think is how to pronounce it, which was a 1958 recording on RCA. This version is the only one I could find in the store. I know we have another one somewhere that just came in actually, but this is The Rite of Spring, and I wanted to pick it because it was spring, and I do like some classical music, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I recommend listening to this all in one piece. If you have to choose, pick side 2 all the way through. Do not stop. It's very important.
Nice, piqued my interest. And last but not least, we have Operation Mindcrime by, of course, Queensrÿche.
My pick. This was the first real concept record that I got, so that I understood that I could follow the story with. So I was always a big Queensrÿche fan. This record came out. Really followed along with the story, the concept. We won't get into the details of it because it's not very friendly for internet. But the real draw to this is Chris DeGarmo. Chris DeGarmo is one of my favorite guitar players of all time. He no longer plays guitar. He doesn't even write much music anymore, which is unfortunate. Chris DeGarmo, though, really was the powerhouse with Jeff Tate on all the Queensrÿche stuff. They pretty much co-wrote everything on here. Most people know Queensrÿche for their next album, which was Empire, which had a whole bunch of hits in 1990. Empire, anybody listening, a whole bunch of things. But this is the album before that. Great album, start to finish. There was a second part of this that was not written by the same members of the band, which I do not feel is as good. Be careful of that because it's very simple. 2 next to the title, completely different album. But Queensrÿche, Operation Mindcrime, great record, love it.
What was, anybody else want to chime in on what their first concept album was? Or? Kilroy was here.
Oh,
I didn't say it had to be a good one. I
No,
just said it had to be an album.
I would say the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, if that can be considered a concept album. David Bowie, that would probably have to be my first.
Was Tommy the Who? Was that also kind of a... Yeah, rock
It's a
opera.
rock opera.
Rock again.
The Wall is the most famous one, for sure.
Who won the drawing on this?
Oh yes, we got to do the drawing.
The drawing will be
If Igor Stravinsky received a vote, I will be very surprised.
Ryan Patterson
Ryan.
from Mandan.
Ryan Patterson.
Mandan. Ryan
Congratulations.
Ryan, so if you're watching,
And what
when you
did
come in the store,
Patterson. He didn't put a pick.
Oh, so it was Queensrÿche. Okay, cool.
No,
some people
it's Mandan.
didn't put picks on there, but go ahead and count them out.
And
let's see
Kenny,
who won.
tell them what they've won.
You have won $10 in the store. And so come in, pick something out.
Yeah, $10 cash out of Kenny's wallet.
You'll get.
They put the
$10,
phone
not
number,
credit.
so really you should call Ryan and tell him he won us $10. We should call him right now.
Put him live.
Live. Leave him a message. Well, I hate to tell everybody, but CCR won. Lance picked.
Oh.
Mass appeal, yeah.
That's
A
right.
worthy contender.
And none of those sold this month.
Mm.
So every now and then one of those will sell up there.
Right. Now we have to get a new pick.
Right, and then we got to hurry up and get a new pick out there. Hey, who's got next month? Oh, Mike.
Good.
All right.
I think he's gonna play some with guitars.
Huh?
Maybe
I don't
not.
know. I'm really torn on what to do, so
Are you?
right now it's down between 3, but it might be some other things might pop into my head. Maybe some screamo music.
Oh, great. That would be
Maybe
just
Air
for me.
Supply.
Maybe Air Supply.
I was gonna say, there's that streak I sense in Mike who would come in with a Milli Vanilli or something just to turn over the tables. I don't know.
No.
No, I don't think he'd
go
go
that
that
far.
far. I don't think he'd go that far.
Oh.
I would do something that Kenny might not completely.
You would do something to get at me, get my goat. And he knows I love Milli Vanilli.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't sing it, that stuff was great. I'm sorry. Girl, you know it's true.
Yeah.
Right, Josh? You know it's true.
I know it's true. My love is for you.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. I love you.
Wow. Okay,
This is great content. Great content.
I probably had the single of that, so I'm
Do
not,
you?
I won't be over here scoffing.
Right? That's its own deep dive right
yeah,
there.
we won't go into that.
Right, we gotta get into that really. But otherwise, I'm trying to think of, do we get through everything else? So, right,
Yeah,
any final comments?
I was just gonna say, enjoy the music, listen to music, encourage listening to music. That's what we want to do, and check this out. Even if you have to sample some tracks on, like YouTube or something like that. They also did record a 40th anniversary live thing in England or something, and they kind of worked through the whole album, which is kind of cool. But I actually don't own that record. I just somehow
so they
live,
have a version of the
much
40th?
wanted the studio version versus live,
Yeah.
but anyway.
I saw the live on YouTube.
I'd choose the studio over the live too.
Of course you
Yeah.
would. No lives, no greatest hits.
Yep, I was just gonna say that.
Wow.
No Fleetwood Mac.
No Peter Frampton.
No
We
Frampton
got your
comes alive.
threes.
Yeah.
No Pink
You know,
Floyd.
this Fastway album produced by Eddie Kramer.
Yeah.
You know what live album he produced? Kiss Alive.
Ooh.
How live is that one though?
So
It's pretty disputable.
probably re-recorded.
They say pretty much everything but the drums.
I can't tell you how many times I found an album and I've contacted Mike, said, "Oh, Mike, I think you're really gonna like this one." And you look and he goes, "No, it's a live album." So I've lost a sale because he won't buy live albums. Is there any you like?
Not really. There's a few.
Well, all Elvis live albums are great, just so you know.
Frampton Comes Alive. I mean, come on.
Frampton comes alive.
I was sighing at you.
Some stuff, like there's a Kiss MTV Unplugged,
Okay.
but the way that was put together, and part of that was because the track listing they decided to do, they did it unplugged, so they had to dig a little deeper in their songs to find things that would translate better to acoustic than God of Thunder, but so
They didn't do any pyro on MTV Unplugged, did
no, but yeah, there's very few live albums.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to find live tracks that are enjoyable, but a full live album, I don't know. I don't think I have any that are in my standard rotation.
they? Delicate Sound of Thunder for me.
Eric Clapton Unplugged.
Mm.
Well, what? Here goes one. Here goes a good
Unplugged
question.
They play a little better
Not
than a
yet.
standard live album, but
Right.
Yeah.
When I'm DJing at weddings, okay, oftentimes I will go to the Cheap Trick version. Well, I want to play, I want you to want me, and it's a live track. Is there any studio tracks on that?
yeah, but if you heard the studio track, you'd know why the live
Live
one
one
is
is-
Okay.
so-
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy in that
Device isn't set up
version.
yet. To
Not-
get started, download the Google Home app on your phone or tablet.
That's not mine.
We just
You've got an Alexa.
Not
is
that
Alexa,
not
or
that the studio version is bad, but when you hear
It
them
doesn't have
si-
that energy.
when you hear
There's
them
my-
side by side, it's kind of like the live version of Rock and Roll All Night versus the original studio version.
Yep.
REO Speedwagon riding the storm out.
For sure.
Yeah, so with that, let me say that another great episode, guys. We here at Music and More, we're thankful for you checking in. Hopefully, you continue to check in, listen, to some of the things that we've learned over the years, and hopefully we can teach you, right? And hopefully we can open your mind and your world up to some more albums. I know a lot of what I've been listening to these guys are stuff probably that I would have never listened to, except for Fleetwood Mac. I love Fleetwood Mac. But
Oh, great. I'm the one who picks something.
Thanks, Lance.
and so I would just want to say, like always, just like with that album, right? In every record, there's a story to be told. So thank you for tuning in, everybody, and we shall see you next month.
Kenny's Music and More, a place like no other, where With records and cassettes, he's a music lover. Blues, rock, country, and more to explore. 10,000 vinyls and memorabilia galore. Come on down to the shop, there's something for all. Step into the world of music and more, where melodies and memories are in store. From Elvis to polka, we have it all. At Kenny's Music and More, you'll have a ball. A teacher and a DJ with a passion so deep. Kenny knows every lyric even in his sleep. His collection is unique, a treasure trove. In Bismarck, Indy, it's the place to just roll.